Hello and welcome to the IdeaCast interview series, episode number 65. My guest in this episode is Justinn Parkinson, and Justinn is a certified clinical hypnotherapist specializing in trauma recovery and cognitive reprogramming. He also uses Neuro-Linguistic Programming to complement the hypnotherapy, and I was happy to have a hypnotherapist on board and have a conversation with him relating to matters of what hypnotherapy is, what one can expect from that discipline and where that modality. And as well, we talk about some broader matters of well-being and mental health. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. I enjoyed having Justinn as a guest. I'd like to welcome Justinn Parkinson to the IdeaCast interview series. I'm looking forward to an interesting and productive conversation that revolves initially around hypnotherapy and Justinn's my first guest to come on as a hypnotherapist, so I want to cover some of the basics for the audience, and then we'll move on from there. So Justinn, welcome. I'm glad to have you on board.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Good. Yeah, you and I had a good pre-meet a few days ago, and I got a good vibe from that. So I think, yeah, we're going to have a nice conversation. And to the YouTube audience, I welcome you as well. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. If you're drawn to this conversation as a subscriber, this was within sort of the brackets of what I like to cover, which is sort of making sense and meaning of things. And I think hypnosis definitely falls within that in those boundaries. So welcome, and I hope this is a productive dialogue for you as well. So Justinn, I think in classic fashion rather, could we maybe get a little bit about you, not personally, but your sort of training background and what brought you to what you do, and then we'll talk about hypnosis overall.
Sure. So I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. I was trained by an incredible teacher. Actually, my teaching was pretty much a one-to-one student ratio. It was during the height of COVID times, and some of the students were sick prior to the course, and you can't even miss a single day. It's so much loaded. And I've been working with helping people and healing modalities for a while, and finally hit something that I feel very strongly about, and the success it can provide for people. It it's a very potent medium. I've had great success myself, and I continue to expand on what is called NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, which is kind of what hypnotherapy is in itself, just in a different state of mind.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not terribly familiar with NLP, so could you draw maybe a couple of comparisons to tie them together?
So NLP is, like I said, neuro-linguistic programming. It is essentially how our mind understands things. It's the language that the brain speaks, and learning how our brain functions in terms of the things that we say to ourselves greatly affects the way we live our lives. And you can openly work on NLP. There's different techniques. I'm sure we may touch on them in this this conversation.
Okay.
In terms of hypnotherapy, you are programming your mind to work in a healthier way, and that's kind of how it converts over. So not only do I provide techniques within my practice while I'm putting people through hypnotherapy, but I also provide techniques that people can do while they're fully, exclusively conscious, talking you and I, that they can take away and use in everyday life.
Okay.
So it's not something that you need to be a professional in. There's lots of resources in NLP, and I think it's actually something that should be taught to youth in institutions. It's such a powerful tool to help regulate emotion and really understand what's going on in our body.
Okay. So there are methods there that are somatic, like you get a response almost physically if you do some of the exercises. Is that what you're saying with, like, for the physical affect, getting someone to be aware of say the mind, and not in a dualistic sense, but just the mind's relationship with the physical? Is that what I'm getting from that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So our bodies, a lot of our physical ailments come from emotional issues.
Mm-hmm.
Things such as even IBS, which a lot of gastrointestinal issues, people find that when they're stressed out or having other um, cognitive struggles,
Mm-hmm.
that their gastrointestinal issues are quite heightened.
Okay.
And the more that they can regulate that, they can overcome whatever ailments they have. And that's a fine example of when we're able to regulate our minds, our thoughts, our emotions, we can actually affect our body physically
Mm-hmm.
in a great way. And our mind is not exclusive to our body and vice versa. They both work in tandem, and we need to respect both aspects.
Mm-hmm.
And NLP really, like you said, it does affect the physical body. It may not be recognizable right away. Sometimes they are. There are some techniques I give to people that can boost their confidence. Imagining, a certain circle on the ground and infusing color into it and certain emotions, and then you step into it, and then you're confident. You're able to step on a stage, and those nerves kind of fade away. And
Mm-hmm.
so there are sometimes things that physically show up right away, but it's more so about the repetition and creating habits in the mind. And that's really the basis of, if you were to break down humans, where a whole clump of habits, the brain likes to be efficient. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't want to use more energy than it needs to. When you're starting off something brand new, you are typically hyper focused, you're very concentrated on what you're doing, and that takes a fair amount of caloric intake and energy.
Mm-hmm.
As you continue to repeat that, eventually you start doing these tasks habitually or without having to think about it. And that's your brain conserving energy by creating these pathways to function. And that's really what I can teach in NLP,
Okay.
is to learn new ways to improve your life through creating positive habit.
Okay. And in your training to be a hypnotherapist, I know very little, so you can correct me. Are there different disciplines or different, say, schools, if you will, of hypnotherapy training? Like I've heard of Ericksonian, and are there different houses? Like like in martial arts, there's different, types,
Right.
styles, and types.
I would say generally things are very similar across the board in
Okay.
terms of processes,
Okay.
but there are, of course, variations. Like with most things, some schools they teach, oh, what's the word? It's kind of escaping me at the moment. It's kind of like negative reinforcement.
Mm.
That's not the term,
Mm-hmm.
but some schools use that to help quit smoking or to adjust food habits. And
Okay.
I personally don't use negative suggestion,
Mm-hmm.
because I believe it can have future ramifications. For
Mm.
example, if you were to create a thought process on eating food, let's say someone wants to stop eating chips because they eat too much,
Mm-hmm.
and you give suggestion on every time you eat a chip, you feel like or see a slug on the chip.
Yeah.
And that can oh, it's called aversion therapy.
Okay.
Aversion therapy.
Okay.
And that can actually transfer over to other foods.
Mm.
It can be
Mm.
actually very effective. And not to say that it will turn out bad, but someone could be overpower that and it's like, okay, whatever, there's a slug. And then next thing you know, on broccoli, there's slugs or
Yeah.
whatever else. So I
Yeah.
tend to avoid aversion therapy. I have briefly used it in terms of for quitting smoking, losing the appeal of the cigarette, having it taste very, disgusting on how it may
Right.
be tasted initially. But I'm very cautious about aversion therapy because of the potential leaping to other parts of your life.
That makes sense. That makes
But
sense.
yes, generally, so Ericksonian, uh, Milton Erickson. He's one of a major founders in terms of modern hypnotherapy. His methods are shared across the board. I've
Okay.
learned some of his scripts as well. But generally, yeah, hypnotherapy is, for the most part, the same.
Okay.
Now, hypnotist work, so stage hypnotism and, for entertainment, uses some aspects, but I like to say, stage hypnotists, they use, 2 steps where I use up to 10 steps.
Mm.
And it's quite in depth.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And that, so talking about stage hypnotists and sort of performative hypnotism, if that's a word, let's talk about some of the myths behind hypnotherapy, as well as sort of the practical reality of what hypnotherapy is as a therapy, as a modality, if you want to maybe work with each of
Sure.
those ideas.
Well, first off, movies, TV shows have created a misconception, quite a bit of misconception of what hypnosis is. And stage hypnotists, there are great people. They put on great entertainment, but has also created a perception about what hypnosis is.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, we're in trance and hypnosis every single day. If you're focused on driving and you get from one point to another and you realize for 10 minutes you weren't even paying attention,
Mm-hmm.
your subconscious got you there. You were actually in a state of trance, state of hypnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing when we're reading a book or really into a movie. A lot of times when we're hyper focused or extremely focused on something, you're likely in a state of trance.
Mm-hmm.
So we go into it every day. It's not some voodoo magic. Um, Now, some of the misconceptions is you're completely zoned out and the person's talking to you and they're making you do all these things.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, you are actually conscious at the same time. So you and I speaking, or the listeners that are hearing right now, they they're in the same state. You're actually, like I said, hyper aware, and I desensitize my clients because they will actually be able to hear the cars outside, the people speaking outside, the wind,
Mm-hmm.
anything, any movements and stuff. That's why it's important for desensitization. People could get up and walk away mid-session if they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
They could just open their eyes, sit up, might be a little bit groggy, but they could say, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I haven't had that happen,
Mm-hmm.
but it's an option.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing about being made to do something that you don't want to do, you can't be made to do anything that's not within your core values.
Mm-hmm.
Stage hypnotists, the reason why they're typically able to get people to bark like a dog, jump around, do silly things, they're actually weaning out a bunch of people. You'll typically see that they'll bring up 10 to 20 people and they'll do a few things, weaning them down to 10, 5, to find the most susceptible people.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening is they're testing who is more susceptible to do the things that they want, and why they're doing these things is likely, I hate to say it, it's probably an ego thing. So
Mm-hmm.
people in the crowd, like, oh, I want to be hypnotized. I would like to get some attention. It'd be great if people were laughing at me at some of the things that I did.
Okay.
And so that's within their core value. They
Okay.
want the attention. They're not saying, I want to bark like a dog,
Yeah.
but they want attention. So their mind is fully open to be essentially manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
And it's consent. So I would say it's not a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in terms of convincing people of what hypnosis is, it does sway it in a certain direction.
Yeah, it sounds like it would have baggage attached to it, to
Yes.
create that perception in the public's consciousness, if you will. Yeah, yeah, and that makes sense that they would be keen to because I've heard that there are people who are resistant to induction,
Mhm.
and so yeah, you want to wean those people out because they're just going to sit there and look at you with a blank stare while you're trying to bring them into induction. But
Some people want to make them look bad. They're like, well, I can't be hypnotized. Here's the
yeah,
thing. If you don't want to be, you won't be.
yeah, it's participatory, right?
Simple.
You've got to, like you
Absolutely.
said, consent to the practice. So
I've had people, hey, my brother has a drinking problem, or my friend has this problem. Can you help? Absolutely, I can help.
Mm-hmm.
But they need to have to want to do it.
Yeah.
If
They got
they
to be,
don't, I can't help them.
that makes sense. They got to be present and engaged.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. Now, on that line of thinking, are there certain personality types that are more uh, uh, say the therapy is conducive to working with, and again, I don't know which method of personality type branding we could talk about, but just like people who are different, uh, cut from different cloths. So maybe somebody's a little more extroverted, a little more stronger personality, and then there's maybe somebody who's more reserved and less likely to exhibit those traits that the person in
Mhm.
the audience who wanted to come up and be part of the show and get the attention. So does that translate into having to, as a practitioner, maybe get a little quick read or less quick read on those types of things?
For sure. There's uh, the people vary greatly, and some people go into induction and into hypnosis very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are slower. People who are very logical, they tend to take a little bit more time because they're thinking about everything that's going on. And I've certainly been challenged by some very, very analytical people.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, during schooling, we're taught about this and we're taught different methods to help bring them into it. For example, someone who's very analytical, they're there, they want help, but you if you were to say, okay, your hand is getting heavier, they might naturally resist, and
Mm-hmm.
well, it's not getting heavier. So there's little tricks like your hand might get heavier or it might get lighter,
Mm-hmm.
and it causes the mind to be set in
Yeah.
between. You're not necessarily telling them what's going to happen, but
Right.
it creates that kind of thing. Or you may go into hypnosis in 5 minutes, you may go in 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
There's different ways to work with that, and being patient. There's different methods like pyramiding, where you have multiple inductions
Mm.
before you go into a deepener. Like there's a lot of different processes,
Okay.
and there's ways to get people in deep. There's tests that I do. It's called somnambulism test, and it's to see if they're deep enough to start doing the work that I need.
Okay.
A lot of people are worried, well, I wasn't sure if I was deep enough. I checked. It's all
Mm.
right. You were
Yeah.
deep enough. Things are
Okay.
working. Uh, yeah. And along the lines of different adjustments for different people, some people need to be moved very slow. So, for example, you are now going into a deep state of relaxation. Other people, you're now going into a deep state of relaxation as we continue forward. Those speed differences can be a world of a difference from
Mm.
person to person.
Mm.
For me, I work very quickly. I go into hypnosis very fast. I'm almost always one step ahead of the hypnotherapist. It's like, okay, now go. I'm already there. Okay, let's start
Yeah.
working, which is
Yeah.
awesome. Those people are fun.
Yeah.
And I work quick. And the funny thing was, during schooling, my classmate that I was working with, she needed to be slowly worked with.
Mm.
And so now I'm thrown into this element where I'm used to going quick and it's easy for me, and I'm forced to go slow. And every person I trained under just happened to be someone who needed to be worked on very slow.
Mm.
I call that, divine timing or whatever you want to name that. But it
Right.
was great for a learning experience for me because it took me out of my comfort zone and put me into a place that I needed to learn to be able to help people.
Okay. Okay. So I'm getting as a practitioner that it's beneficial for you to be the hypnotized as well as the one doing the therapy. Does that make sense as a question that if you are a practitioner, that it helps to be on the sort of receiving end or the other side of that practice? Does that help you develop your not skills necessarily, but just the intuitive flow that's developed between?
Sure. I would say to an extent, yes. I'd
Okay.
be surprised if there were any schools that didn't have the students go into hypnosis themselves. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, not that it's impossible, but I see that as a bit strange, not participating in the modality that you've experienced. Now, the reason I've done it is because I think it's super effective. I've cleared a lot of things through hypnosis myself very quickly, and other people very quickly. That would take traditional psychotherapy years potentially. But yes, having been in hypnosis, it does give you kind of an understanding of the feeling that you go through. At one point, at school, we are going into hypnosis every single day.
Okay.
And I got, it happened so frequently that when I was going to sleep at night, I could feel the different stages of trance before falling asleep. It was really cool because I could tell that I was actually falling asleep rather than just kind of laying there, eyes closed, and then eventually going out.
Magic. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
it was really fascinating. Now that doesn't happen to me anymore. I'm not in hypnosis every single day. I'd like to be, maybe not every day, but
Right.
it's costly, but very effective. It's well worth the money. I do it when I can. Very busy schedule. We are all very busy.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody really has enough time to do as much therapy as we need to. That includes going to the gym or just exercising or making sure you're eating properly. I consider that types of therapy as well. Taking care of your body, your mind, and emotions in any way is a type of therapy, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Now, in that spirit, do you get, you call them clients? Are they clients or how
Clients?
do you,
Yeah.
clients? Okay. Do you get clients that are doing an integrated system with you? Like they have a therapist and then they work with you, or they maybe have someone who's like a coach maybe, and they work with them. And, do you find you're part of an integrated system with some of your clients?
I highly encourage it.
Mm-hmm.
I call my work integrative therapy. Like I said, I don't just do hypnosis for people. I give them NLP techniques,
Mm-hmm.
methods to continue to grow outside of my sessions.
Okay.
Along the lines of being integrative and working with other people, dietitians, coaches, etc. I actually feel that that's the way things are actually moving to.
Okay.
And I really would encourage, if there's any practitioners listening, to reach out and get rid of the mentality that you're fighting for clients and work as a community to bring people together, because I believe that we can very much use multiple different aspects. As much as I think hypnotherapy is incredible and it can solve 99% of problems, super effective, I'm not always going to hit all the points for every single person. Maybe hypnotherapy is plenty for one person and they can solve every issue they've got. Wonderful. Some people might need a coach to keep them accountable for their new actions. That's not my job. I'm not a coach. I don't pay. I do have courses where I coach people one-on-one, but it's not in my typical repertoire outside of hypnotherapy.
Okay.
And so integrative therapy, yes, I highly suggest it, even if people aren't doing hypnosis. If you're going to, a psychotherapist, maybe enlist a coach as well, or a dietitian, or touch on all the areas, because you're going to get information and different perspectives from each practitioner.
Okay. And in this same sort of spirit, I have a book on the shelf, and I was thinking about him when I was preparing to have you as a guest. And Michael Yapko, have you ever read any of his stuff?
I've not.
Okay, he's got a book called Mindfulness and Hypnosis, and I think it's kind of a comparative analysis of say mindfulness practice and hypnotherapy. So when we talk about an integrated system of practices, that strikes me intuitively that some manner of mindfulness, especially guided meditations, may be complementary to the services that you provide and the work that you do with your client. I keep wanting to call them patients, but the clients that you have. And so, and it's been 5 or 6 years since I've read his book, so I can't do any justice to pull out what he was trying to point out on there. But I think, again, the project was to draw comparisons to, and then maybe divide like what's what is realizable through hypnotherapy and what is more or less realizable through a good mindfulness practice. But that strikes me as being a nice part of an integrated system. And on that subject, could you sort of maybe in your terms define differences between, say, either a silent meditation practice, a guided meditation, and then what a hypnotherapist does, if there's ways to distinguish those? Obviously the silence is one thing.
For me, meditation is hypnosis. Okay. It's really a matter of semantics. When you realize what the mind is doing and the state it's going into, we're almost more in a state of trance and hypnosis in everyday life than we are not. Now, the effects of silent hypnosis, so mindfulness, versus a guided meditation, I would say they're almost one and the same. One allows a little bit more ease. Some people struggle with trying to find out what to do in the silence. What I like to tell people is mindfulness meditation is not about being silent, about being quiet. It's really about becoming in tune with what's going on. So if you are doing silent meditation and thoughts come in, recognize that they come in and congratulate yourself. The idea is that your recognition of distraction is part of being mindful. That's what it is. It's not, and I think a lot of people actually hurt themselves when they're just trying to be quiet. Yeah, focusing on your breath, it's great. And eventually you have a bit more clear mind at each session that you do. And eventually you don't get distracted every 30 seconds, every minute, every 4 minutes. It's every 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And that's great. It just means you're becoming more mindful. You're able to connect with your mind more. Okay. Again, a reminder is congratulate yourself on the distraction. Oh, I was itchy. Oh, okay. Oh, I thought about this thing. Okay, good job. Let's go back to my breathing. Guided meditation, it's a little bit easier because you're focusing typically on the voice or the music that's going on, and it allows you to be less distracted, but it also still requires you to be mindful and paying attention to what's going on and what's being told. Now, hypnotherapy, what that is you're going into a state of trance. It's very similar in meditation where you can have reflective moments of what's going on in your life. The difference is the subconscious is speaking to your conscious mind directly. And I like to put it basically this way. In the most basic form, I'm a guide. I get people into the certain state that they need to be in. We talk about beforehand what they want to work with. So if it's like an emotion or a certain habit, and I touch on that, I ask their subconscious where they need to go. The subconscious says, I need to go down this path. I say, okay, go down that path. And so they go down it, and we get to essentially the starting point or the root. And then we hit that, and I say, okay, what do you need to heal? And the subconscious essentially says, oh, I need this, or so and so Justinn needs this. And I say, okay, let's do that. And that's a very basic way. It's a bit more than that. Sometimes people need tools like their adult self to come in, or a magic wand, or there's reframing so that we look at the experience different. But like I said, at a basic form, I'm asking where they need to go. I tell them to go there. I ask them what they need to heal, and then I heal them. The subconscious knows everything from beginning to present. It knows everything you need to heal because it's within you. It has every single memory. It knows what's caused the trauma. It knows what's causing you to feel anxious or reacting in a certain way. And it understands how to adjust that. And I essentially just guide people on how to follow through. Sometimes in life, we just need a little bit of guidance. We're a species that works in community. There's been plenty of research and experiences where people, when they spend time by themselves, there's great reflection that they find. But in the end, they realize that they need community, they need people around them. And that is part of guidance. And sometimes you just need a friend to tell you something. Hey, maybe try this, or even just to listen to you. And that is enough for people to gain perspective. I am realistically not telling anybody to do anything. I'm just making awareness of what their body and what their mind actually needs.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, because when we had our pre-meet, you were talking about sort of being ethically, if that's a too strong a word, but bound not to lead a person in this session, and sort of planting thoughts that don't need to be there. And I think that's a great responsibility that you exercise, or any practitioner would exercise in that,
of course,
discipline.
I very strongly agree with that. Leading is a very big thing that was emphasized during our training, was to be very cautious on leading. A lot of the times, as I'm writing notes down, it's very important because I should be using the words that they're saying. Words have vibration, everything vibrates. You learn that in basic science. And their words have a vibration to it, and their body and mind responds to those specific words. You're more prone to listen to something in one of your ideas than Joe Blow coming out and saying, well, you should do this. And that's one way that you help negate leading, is by exclusively using their words as much as possible.
Okay.
And with that, I like to tell people there's a state of hypnosis called awakened hypnosis. And this is something that doctors have the power of, and they probably don't even realize it. Awakened hypnosis only takes three things. It takes focus, emotion, and trust. So if someone goes into the doctor and they're sick, first of all, usually they trust the doctor. That's why they're there. They're sick, so they want to pay attention, they're focused, they want change, and usually there's emotion involved. When we don't feel good, we feel emotions. You feel miserable or sad or whatever else, angry, frustrated.
Right.
And so a doctor's words are very impactful. That's why typically you won't have an oncologist tell someone you have 6 months to live. I don't know if that's because they're aware of the awakened hypnosis or it's an ethical thing, but the awakened hypnosis, you can literally kill someone by telling them you have 6 months to live, because you've just dropped that directly into the subconscious. They're hypnotized, it's in there, boom, they die. That's part of leading. You need to be cautious because the words that you say will likely affect how they're going to act in the future. And that goes with people who are very not even just professionals, someone who's just very confident in how they speak in life. Maybe stop a stranger. Hey, I saw your shoulders are kind of heavy. I think you should be doing this instead. And maybe you have trauma from your dad and you need to correct this. And that can be dangerous.
Sure.
So it's a cautionary tale. Be aware of what you're saying. There are potential repercussions in the future, especially if you're certain. Because if you're certain, other people read that on you and they'll trust you. They'll pay attention to it. And that's why it's very important not to lead.
A good caveat for both persons who are curious, who are listening, who may want to go see a hypnotherapist, or even a coach for that matter. Not having them lead you with their inquiry methods and the things they do and planting ideas. I think that's sort of an ungrounded practice to
always be curious when someone tells you something, even if they're a professional. Even my daughter, I tell my daughter, feel free to question the things I tell you, because although I do feel that I am certain in it, I would prefer that you question and understand. Don't just take it for what's being told. Question it. I know we talked about the word skepticism or skeptic.
Yeah.
And for me, I consider myself a skeptic, but in a sense that I not that I don't believe anything, but that it's healthy to ask questions and
Yeah.
to make certain yourself, even though someone's a professional, you trust your coach and whatnot, and maybe you do want to take in that information, but be sure that it's right. Be sure
Yeah.
that it resonates correctly with you.
Hmm. Yeah, usually if I have an inquiry, especially related to health, I will go to what I consider to be reasonable sources. And it's not that I do it like if my doctor says one thing, my general practitioner says one thing, and then I want to question her. It's more like if I don't have that person's presence and advice, that I will go to NIH or Mayo Clinic or Boston University.edu, something where it's not mommy blogger or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, and then get 3 or 4 different perspectives from what I would consider to be reasonable sources of information, and just hold all of that loosely. And then maybe, and I always joke with my regular doctor when I see her, I'm like, okay, I met with Dr. Google today, but I respect what you just have to say because you went to 8 years of school and 3 years of residency to be where you are now. But this is what I'm presenting to you. And I've, tried to cut out some of the fat so that I have. So yeah, I absolutely agree. So there's different types of skepticism, but I think the kind of skepticism that is pure inquiry is very beneficial. And
Yes.
also not skepticism that leads to confirmation bias, where it's like, well, I'm just going to, go and find the information that fits, the
Right.
narrative that I've constructed, and then I'm going to be right. So it's
Yeah.
more like I'm not right, and I know I'm not going to ever be right, but I'm going to have the best information
Mm-hmm.
possible, and that's what will move things forward. So
Well,
I
it's
agree.
the
I agree.
it's the basis for any real scientist.
Yeah.
They will, even if they have proven something, a healthy scientist will be open to challenge, be
Yeah.
open to it being proven wrong,
Yeah.
because that's the best way to advance.
Yeah.
Not sit in certainty and be open to challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's literally what Popperian falsification is. And when you do an experiment, you're trying to prove it wrong, right? That's the healthiest science. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I want to be, I want to be right, but I have to
Yeah.
prove that I can be wrong too, or falsify my claim. So, but yeah, skepticism is good, especially in entering into strange terrain and territory. That
Hmm.
you just be it's okay to be naive. It's okay to be ignorant. I love ignorance. I mean, not ignorance that's used in a weaponized kind of way, like I'm going to pretend like I know something. It's more that you just are a babe in the woods and you need to learn. And I think, as a species, we're still babes in the woods.
Totally.
So there's no shame in it. Nobody's, there are people who know things, but even there. So here's an example. Like the people that I find that are very well educated and very well disciplined will say something like, I don't have a good answer, but this is the best information I can provide you. And to me,
Yes.
that's comforting to know that they're just being honest and humble and saying, this is the best we have so far. And if somebody can come around tomorrow and challenge this and make it better, then that's what good argumentation is. And
Yeah.
those are the results we want to see to move the whole thing forward. It's not about me. It's about yeah. So I respect those kind of people that start sentences out that way. It's like,
Absolutely. I respect someone who's willing to understand their limitations
yeah.
and knowledge. I will respect them more than someone who's certain about everything.
Yeah, you got to watch those people,
You're
the experts.
right.
So, in one of your podcasts, I mentioned parts work, and do you want to unpack parts work for us and how
Sure.
that relates to what you do?
As we grow from babes to present, there are parts of us that develop. And these parts are ingrained into us essentially to protect ourselves. They're there for our highest value. And sometimes these parts, they actually become outdated and they need to be adjusted or thrown out. Something that happened maybe in your teens and it's caused you to act a certain way socially. And now that, let's say, you're in your 30s or 40s and it just doesn't apply anymore, it's actually starting to hold you back, maybe in the workplace or something like that. And these parts need to be adjusted. And I actually do a lot of parts therapy. So there's parts of people, for example, coping mechanisms like smoking.
Hmm.
There's parts of them that hold on to that smoking habit because it created an ease of anxiety or anything like that. Maybe during high school they had a stressful time and that was their exit. So not only are they potentially addicted to the substance, but emotionally and mentally hooked into that
Mm-hmm.
because of the actions. And that's essentially the basis of trauma. Trauma is parts of us that have developed. So anyone who's experienced, I mean, for me, trauma is everything from childhood abuse to stubbing your toe on the coffee table.
Mm-hmm.
All of those actions will cause you to act differently. So, as being abused as a child, maybe you don't like being in tighter spaces or in small spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a part that was developed to keep you secure.
Okay.
Stubbing your toe on the coffee table, maybe you don't walk so close to tables anymore. And that's a part of you that was developed to protect your physical body from getting harm again.
Sure.
And some of these parts are good, some of them are not.
Okay.
And that's what I explore. I do age regression and we explore where these parts originated, find out if these parts actually love the individual. The really fascinating thing is these parts will generally talk as a third person. So for me, I have a part called Piggy. It's actually one of the only female parts that have come about. Most of my parts are male, but I wanted to find the part of me that was responsible for the love for my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, the practitioner asked, uh, "Where did you start?" And the part goes, "Well, Justinn doesn't know this, but it started at this time." Now, I am consciously speaking in third person. It's not that part, using my mouth and vocal cords. It's expressing to me in that way. My subconscious is expressing in third person, but I'm consciously choosing to express verbally to the practitioner in third person.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard everything. There's no weird things that people can tell me. And it is a bit strange to speak in third person, but you're really just reciting what your brain is saying. If you were just getting images, like, okay, I see a bridge and there's water under the bridge, and I imagine walking over it. Sometimes that's how the subconscious speaks to you.
Mm.
Sometimes it speaks to you in dialogue, like I just expressed. And I really enjoy when it speaks in third person because it's like you're genuinely talking to them. And
Mm.
when the client can actually be open to expressing what they're hearing in their mind, it becomes a lot more fluid.
Mm.
Usually why it takes a few sessions for people to kind of open up. Uh, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a sense of embarrassment
Mm.
to talk in third person because it's strange. You don't go during the day like, oh yes, Justinn's feeling happy right now.
Yeah.
You'd
He's
say I'm
gonna.
feeling happy right now.
Right, right. Yeah, we usually jokingly think of, celebrities, the so and so, is not pleased,
Yeah,
we're not
exactly.
pleased. Yeah, yeah. It can get a little off the charts. But I also think it's really neat because I'm seeing this as a kind of safe dissociation almost. And it may be not what the nuts and bolts of what's going on, but to hear that in somebody who is comfortable enough to speak of an aspect of themselves in a third person, that this is a kind of safe dissociation that can have good affect or good outcome. So maybe I'm reading it wrong, but I think that's what I'm
For sure. I think
hearing
it's a
in a sense.
great way to look at it. Even if you just take the basic parts of us in terms of the consciousness, so
Mm-hmm.
you and I being conscious talking, and then you have the subconscious, which
Mm.
is generally responsible for your autonomic functions, breathing, pumping the blood, through your veins, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so they work individually, and there's no reason why they are, we're made of a whole bunch of parts. We generally identify as a single person, single organism because we got one body. We speak out of how we do. And it's funny because back in the day, you'd go to a psychotherapist and, oh, you talk to yourself,
Yeah.
and then the psychotherapist thinks in their head and talks to themselves in their head,
Yeah, yeah.
it's this funny thing, but that's the reality. Is sometimes you talk to yourself, and if you're just a single individual, why would you need to talk to yourself? If the thought comes out, it just exists. Okay, there's no reason to re-speak it, but really we're made up of many different parts,
Mm,
and it's okay. It's hard. Duality is a difficult concept to grasp for humans
yeah.
because we're so much in this 3D world of,
Mm,
well, I feel my fingers here. Like I said, I'm a single-bodied person, and that's crazy that there's more inside working on its own. But that's the truth.
mm-hmm,
You don't think about your heart pumping blood. You don't
mm-hmm,
think Generally you don't think about breathing.
mm-hmm,
We sometimes take control of that, but
mm-hmm,
our autonomic functions are used by different parts of us.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I've grown really comfortable with I don't know if there's a difference between internal dialogue and the conversational thing. I tend to look at it as my um, having an internal conversation with myself, and it's very productive in a way because it's enfolded with imagination. So when I'm out doing a really mundane task, I go into this inner space, and then I just have this flowing narrative. Now I don't get into arguments with myself, and I don't hear external voices that say things. So it's not to invoke that imagery, I guess. But I just love that when I'm in my own little world and I'm doing again something that doesn't require executive stuff happening, that I can just flow think and I can reason through things. And I do. It's not that there's two aspects of me per se. It's just that I can't even describe it. I guess you would know. I mean, it's just this
Well,
narrative that flows, but you're acknowledging an inquiry, or you're acknowledging maybe some attempt at stating a point.
I would say from what you're describing, we have our quick thoughts that we bounce off of ourselves. But if you are in deeper thought, maybe you're sitting down and you really think about a situation and mulling it over, I would say you're partially in a state of trance and you
Mm,
are actually kind of communicating with your subconscious. Like I
okay.
said, your subconscious has all the memories. When I regress people, I regress them back to like age 5, age 3, age 2. Sometimes
Mm,
people go back into the womb and there's
mm-hmm,
consciousness then. And I could tell you right now, I do not remember anything prior to the age of like 6 or 7
mm,
personally, but I've been regressed to 5 to 3 years old, 2 years old, 1 years old, to when I was in my parents' arms and stuff. And I've corroborated some of these stories like, hey, I had a session and mentioned this happened and this was kind of going on. They said, oh, yeah, yeah, that happened. And it's like, wow, that's so incredible that all those memories they are in there, even though the conscious mind, it filters it out. It's not
mm-hmm,
information that we need to properly function today.
yeah.
So it's something that goes in the back. It's brain process that we don't need,
Mm-hmm,
even though that we can use it to heal.
yeah.
That's one of the great things about hypnosis is we can go back to these points that have caused these traumatic events or have stemmed, where anger comes from
Mm-hmm,
or jealousy, and it brings us back to times that we can't consciously think about or even not even reach there through meditation. That's one of the reasons why I love hypnosis.
yeah. Yeah, it's penetrating in that sense. You'll appreciate this. It's become a secondary memory. And I say that in the sense that I I don't have direct recall of the event, but I can remember remembering the event, if that
Hmm.
makes any sense. But I
Sure.
went to a scene when I was an infant, and it was a pram. It was one of those things you push around like
Hmm.
a bass. What do they call them? Baby carriage or whatever.
Yeah.
This is probably 1916, probably 1970. I was born in 69, so it was probably 70. But I can remember looking up, and the shield to the pram was there, the sunscreen thing, and there were two faces looking in at me, and they were talking baby talk, like,
Hmm.
oh, aren't you cute, like women do when they see babies. And I remember looking at both of them going, this isn't my language. And I'm sort of
Wow.
imposing my,
Hmm.
and I carried this memory my whole life, but because it's just weird. And I can remember looking at these two and I'm like, this is not my language, but
Hmm.
I didn't have a language, but I had that
Sure.
interior thought. And I thought, in hindsight, as a 50 something year old person now, I'm like, that's weird, that
Yeah.
that I had that ability to understand that I didn't
Mhm.
understand. You know, it's weird how our
Yeah.
brain works, but that's one of my, and then to go to actual recall, I'd say for me, probably about four. I think my fourth birthday is far back, but it was because there were cake and fire trucks, and I had the vivid, you know, they
Mhm.
made me take a nap that day, and I was like furious. It was my birthday, and why the hell am I taking a nap? And I got up and I looked out my bedroom window on the second floor, and there were all these kids in my backyard, and I'm like, what? And I flew down the stairs. Yeah, you know how kids are, and so that's the close. That's probably the best early memory I have. I have a memory of the birthday before that. My pop and I were, he was carrying my cake for my third birthday, and I was asking him questions. And we were walking somewhere, but it was very faint and very disjointed. But yeah, it's amazing how we sort of wall out, or it just fades into oblivion. Those, because when you think about it, not all of our cognitive apparatus are on board even up until 22 years of age, but
Yeah.
but even in those earlier stages, we're in this sort of, some people call it a beta wave state or whatever you want to call it, but it's just this sort of not necessarily cohesive recording process or whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it. So that we can, as you're saying, during induction, go back to those periods is fascinating. That's really neat. In fact, I should
Well,
try it and see what comes up.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm happy to help you out with that.
Oh yeah, that would be fun. That would be fun to
Kind of touching on you mentioned that brain state for people as they grow up. So kids are actually in a constant state of hypnosis.
yeah. And is it
And
alpha state? I probably said it wrong, because beta is what we're doing right now, right?
yeah,
I think they were
I'm not
saying alpha or something.
sure
But
what kind
anyway,
of state they would be in
okay,
specifically.
okay. Sorry about
You know,
that.
when I'm no, that's okay. When I'm doing hypnosis, I typically will drop people all the way down into a theta state.
Okay.
Now, what children are in, I'm not 100% sure. I do have some literature that I brushed over it briefly. I I have a book that is called Hypnosis for Children, or Integrative Hypnosis for Children,
Okay.
and it teaches a lot of methods on how we can educate children. And if you actually look at kids, they soak things up really easily. One of the reasons why as adults we don't soak in these things is there's a part of our mind in between the conscious and the subconscious called the critical faculty, or I call it simply the gatekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
And this gatekeeper takes in any new information and holds on to it for about 24 hours and compares it to our core values. And if it doesn't match, generally checks it out. And this is to protect ourselves emotionally, mentally, as to not be swayed so easily.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons why affirmations are told to do it frequently, over and over and over. It's kind of like saying hi to the gatekeeper and then becoming familiar with the gatekeeper, and then it starts to allow it to drop into the subconscious.
Okay.
And while in a state of hypnosis, your gatekeeper is moved aside, and you can drop direct suggestion into the subconscious. That's why it's important to be cautious of what you tell children, because they soak it up pretty much instantly. They don't really have that gatekeeper there to protect them from new ideas and concepts. And that's why they soak in so much stuff. That's why they learn language so much faster.
Right.
It's their mind is just open to receive.
Yeah. And from an evolutionary standpoint, that makes perfect sense, because you got to get everything on board fairly quickly. Although humans, we spend many years raising our young, but that critical period. In fact, I've seen documentaries about children that were raised by dogs, and I guess there's like a window at 13 where they rescued a child who was like 14 or just past the threshold, and it was not possible for her to learn human speak. She had commands, kind of maybe what the dogs taught her, but she didn't have the ability at 14 or wherever she was to learn, which is sad, because you think about adults can learn a foreign language that she couldn't onboard things. But it's so, I guess, part of our growth as persons, as into maturity, that's such a critical phase. So you were saying a moment ago that children are in this kind of constant state of receptivity, or yes. Okay. So that's fascinating. But again, it makes sense, right? That we wick up so much, and that again has a negative downside, I guess, because trauma, dysfunction, we take all that in,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you become mid-teens and it kind of starts to settle in, and you hit your 20s and you kind of, unless it was an extremely traumatic event, you tend to start forgetting where these parts developed and why they developed, and it just becomes a part of you. And a lot of people say, well, that's just who I am. Well, I don't think that's an excuse ever. Absolutely, it does take time to
Mhm.
adjust your personality at times, and that's okay. It takes time, and you can work with that, but never, I would say, never allow yourself to say, well, that's who I am and I can't
Mm,
change that.
mm.
That's nonsense. That's
Okay.
being complacent. That's allowing yourself to just be a victim in life.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
like to say that people can lose the victim mentality and become heroes through it.
Mm,
We are, you know, we are an accumulation of our experiences, and you wouldn't be who you are without those experiences. Now, I have some friends who have been through some crazy traumatic stuff, from kidnapping to abuse,
hmm.
and it's made them who they are today. And of course, I don't condone the people who've caused these things, but I like to question them. You know, if you hadn't experienced any of this trauma, let's say your parents were perfect to you, you had good partners growing up, and you didn't experience this trauma, where would you be today? What would
Yeah.
you be doing? Would you be in your profession? Would you be wanting to help out these people that are experiencing those adversities themselves? And it really puts them back for a moment and thinking, wow, like I probably wouldn't be helping these kind of people. Maybe I would be working at McDonald's, or maybe I'd be a firefighter instead, or
Yeah.
something like that. And not in a space of where you're trying to heal people or help others get over that adversity.
Hmm.
And again, you can choose to be the victim and let it destroy your life and be sad for the rest of your life. That's fine. You can do that.
Yeah.
Or you can take those experiences, become the hero, because no one helped you through that. Maybe some people got you out of those spaces, but ultimately it was you.
Yeah.
You got yourself through that experience mentally, emotionally. Maybe it left a couple scars, but now you are that person who's never going to let that happen to you again.
Hmm.
You're not going to let other people go through those experiences, and you're going to be able to teach through that. You
Yeah.
are now becoming a hero. You're no longer a victim.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a pre-meet the other day with a woman who wrote a book on covert narcissism, and the parent that raised me, was some variation, whether it was dark vulnerable triad or a covert narcissist. I can't analyze, I can't diagnose, but I can assume from 30 years of living with the person and interacting with them that there was something to that effect. And so I'm alluding to how adversity strengthens you in a way. It can crush you and kill you, and then that's when you have to go get help intervention from others. And I highly recommend that to people. But also, I look at it as like an annealing process. When you take a piece of iron out of the fire and you smack it around with a hammer, and you're folding those iron crystals back
Mm-hmm.
over on each other, and you make a katana sword or whatever it is that has to be strong, that you are annealing that item. And so I see that life of adversity, and I'm like you, there's no reason why people should have to go through that, but unfortunately it's part of our human experience. That can be seen as an annealing process that makes you stronger, because I'm in that same. Now mine was very middle class, very first world adversity, and I fully acknowledge that. There's people have suffered a hell of a lot more. And my parent that was the abuser, if you will, had a horrible childhood, and I understand why they went through that. But for me, again, I see it as a blessing in a sense that I went through that, because like you said, I could be very self-absorbed and not give a crap about anybody and just me. But now, and this is why I do these interviews, it's like I want to share with humanity. I do have fixer tendencies in me where I want to help, but they're more like somebody sitting at the table wanting to moderate a conversation, not necessarily like, I know what's right for you and I want, to help you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like, no, I just want to hear and listen. So anyway, I'm babbling, but I agree with you that can be the best way to come out of the ashes, is to be focused and checking in with yourself. Because again, I think we can get into fixer patterns where we just want to save people and fix people, and that's going a little too far. But I think
Yeah.
if you can moderate that and balance it,
Oh,
it's a
it's something
wonderful skill.
I don't struggle with it, I've had people who've had deep traumatic experiences, and in a single session release all of that trauma, which is incredible. And so whenever someone's like, "Oh, I've got this going on, I got that," in my head, I'm like, "Ooh, I can help you with that. I can fix that." But in reality, it's the person themselves. That's why I tend not to give unsolicited advice anymore. I mean, it's not something I usually did anyway, but especially now, understanding that the subconscious has so much power and ability to heal themselves, that I just want people to be aware that you have everything inside of you and that you can heal yourself. And that's more so where I lead towards now, and being cautious, is that they don't need me. I'm more than happy to guide them. But every individual, they don't need anyone. They have the power within them to heal themselves, but also to know that it's okay to ask for assistance. It's okay to ask for guidance. And that's also a very powerful thing, for people to accept guidance and help from others. That has to come from themselves. They have to choose to do that, right? And when they choose to do that, their life will change. When you're choosing to change and consciously know that you want to, you will. That's the great part.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the motivation. And that's again where I think suffering is a great motivating device. And I don't prescribe suffering to anyone, but I think when we find ourselves, pulling our hair out and we're at our wits' end, it's a perfect invitation from whatever you want to call it, the universe or yourself or whatever, to say, I've had enough and I want a real solution. I'm not going to, keep dodging this thing. And so, yeah, to acknowledge that you call it aiming for solutions, I think, in your work, is you're looking for the healthy, holistic and comprehensive way out.
Yeah. Well, I actually want to touch on how you're saying, like, when we've had enough kind of thing. So there's two things I want to actually say. So the first one is, the research has shown that our minds are pliable during times of crisis. So if you're going through crisis, that's the time to start picking new habits, because they're going to start sticking and your mind's not going to fight you. The second thing is, there were studies done. I believe it was one of the founders of NLP, Richard Bandler. It may have been one of his co-creators that did this study, but they pulled in all these people that overcame stuff, whether that's, self-negativity, smoking, eating, whatever, anything that they've overcome, that they struggled to. And he brought them in and he asked them, what got you to change? What got you to overcome it? And time again, the answer was essentially, I had enough. It wasn't that they wanted to change, it was that they had enough. And so when you've had enough, that's when you're really going to start changing. And that's partially part of the process of hypnosis that I do. Is, let's say someone's experiencing jealousy or anger, whatever, pick an emotion. And I ask them when the last time they've experienced it, or if they can invoke that sensation in their body. And then I have them blow it up as big as they can, feel it as hard as they can. So if it's anger, feel it until it's as you're as angry as you can get at that person or that thing, and let me know when you can't get any more angry. And then they get there and they're like, okay, I'm there. And that's what I've done. I've pushed them to it's enough. And then we start the regression and we go down, we find where it came from. We
Mm-hmm.
find where that point started, and then we reframe them. So get yourself to it's enough.
Mm-hmm.
If you are the example that was given for the one person was they got in arguments with their mother and it was nonstop. And you know what? Their mother was dead at this point too.
Mm-hmm.
And in their head, they were still arguing with their
Mm-hmm.
mother because it had just been ingrained in them with, well, that's not good enough, or, something like that.
Yeah.
And so they built up the point where they just had enough of arguing with their mother. That was enough, enough, enough. They built it up in their head so strongly that they said, I'm done. And they
Right.
started to do the work and get rid of it. So, anyone who's listening, if you want to make some changes, make that uncomfortable feeling or sensation, get it as big as you can. It'll make you uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
but make it to the point where you're just sick of it and you don't want to feel that anymore.
Mm.
And then flip the script and decide, okay, I'm going to change that. I'm not going to feel like that anymore. I'm not going to act like that anymore. This is not a habit I want anymore.
Makes sense. Makes great sense. Would you be comfortable sharing a couple of I don't know if you want to call them anecdotes of outcomes, or if that's the right word, or experiences you had with your clients that speak to the work and speak to
Sure.
results. Okay, yeah, if you're good with that.
One of the ones that really solidified for me that hypnosis is powerful, it's potent, and it works is, like I said before, I'm a skeptic at
Mm-hmm.
heart. I challenge everything. And even day after day of being hypnotized, I was like, okay, am I really going to go in and be hypnotized today? And I was every single day. But one of the things was I have been in the military, I've been in trades work, I've done a ton of employment and careers where you
Okay.
have to wake up early.
Mm.
And my body despised waking up early. It didn't enjoy it. It felt gross. My mind was not there. And people told me, you'll get used to it. You'll get used to it
Oh,
over
geez.
time. I never got used to it. Years and years and years and years, well over a decade of
Mm.
work that every single morning. And it sucked. It was really frustrating. Didn't
I
matter if I
bet.
went to bed early or I had food or breakfast ready, nothing was working.
Mm.
My teacher, it was the first session of hypnosis, and they're like, what do you want to work on? I want to work on waking up early and not being frustrated at it. I could wake up, but I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
Single session. The next day, I woke up 6:30 in the morning. I had created an anchor for it, so I counted to five, and by the time I got to five, I'd be awake and alert and ready to go. My mind automatically kind of adjusted it. By the time I got to four, my eyes shot open,
Mm.
and when I hit five, my body did not want to stay in bed. I needed to get out of bed,
Wow.
and it happened day after day
Mm.
after day, and eventually I didn't even need to count to five anymore. And every morning now, my body is automatically awake at 6:30, maybe 7 o'clock, usually 6:30,
Mm-hmm.
and it's generally ready to go,
Mm.
unless I've stayed up really late doing some
Yeah.
work or something. But I'll wake up at that time and I get up and it's like, okay, let's start the day. And
Very
for
nice.
me, that was like one of the biggest things in my life that was a roadblock because we have to wake up every day. I had to experience that sensation every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to have that flip in one single session, bless my teacher for being an incredible, practitioner and
Mm-hmm.
having this happen to me because it opened my eyes. And from that day forward, I knew this is what I wanted to do to help change people's lives, to get people out of trauma,
Mm-hmm.
to have people live their best life.
Yeah. Amen. That's neat. That's really cool. And you mentioned earlier somebody had let go in one session of was it trauma or something that was weighing them
Sure.
down?
So I had a client, this is one of my favorite examples. I had a client whose spouse had died 2.5 years prior, and they were just kind of going in a slow downward spiral. Their
Mm-hmm.
family had tried to get them into every type of therapy.
Mm,
They were starting hoarding, their house was filling up
mm,
with stuff. They were just depressed all the time. And life was kind of, like I said, going in a downward spiral.
yeah.
Fortunately, they decided to take an opportunity with me and see if they could make some change.
Okay.
I walked them through a certain session, and 2 days later, they took their wedding band off. They
Mm,
had worn it for 2.5 years. They started cleaning their house. They started organizing.
mm,
After years of getting advice from people, their kids trying to help them, a single session that I spent maybe 45 minutes on with them, their life flipped and turned around. They
mm.
started taking care of themselves, eating healthier. Some of the physical ailments that they were experiencing were starting to fade away. And that is one of my favorite stories because this person was in a constant grieving state, and I got them out of it and changed their life. I love it. I love having people come out of their experience, even if they've had gone through this trauma, they were bawling their eyes out, and they come out at the end, like, oh, my muscles are relaxed, my mind is more at ease, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel lighter, and they have a smile on their face. And it's funny when they say, I'm not sure if there's any change that's been made, and I could tell right away their face is a lot more slacked, they're a lot more relaxed.
Okay.
They definitely did. And as they reflect on the experience that they had over that night or the next day or week or month, it just starts to expand more and more.
Mm, mm. So did I hear you right? Like when somebody's in a session with you, that there could be this catharsis, this crying, and this release in real time during
Mm-hmm.
the induction.
Not during the
So
induction,
when they're coming back out, then
actually within the trance state.
okay.
So the induction is getting them to that process. And then I have what's called a deepener afterward that just gets them deeper and deeper into that trance state. And then I do my little test to make sure they're in that state. And then we go through the therapeutic session.
Mm,
And I bring them out afterwards. So I make sure, you can open certain doors, you make sure you close them. And yeah, I mean, I just in schooling, in the short amount of time that I was in school, I probably cried more in that period of time than I had in the 2 years prior,
mm,
altogether, which was so incredible. And I had actually posted a video on social media how some people are concerned about reliving or re-experiencing their trauma. And yes, it can be very heavy, very intense while they're experiencing it. But the process we go through by the time we get out, which, they may have experienced trauma, and then 25 minutes later, I'm pulling them out of the hypnotic experience after we've reframed and put in positive suggestion, and they feel great afterward. I future test them. I put them in a scenario that would typically cause them to react in the way that they're wanting to heal. And instead of scared, angry, frustrated, it's, I feel better. I feel good. I feel confident. And you're like, you're totally changing their whole mentality. So when they come out, those things are no longer plaguing them, even though they, not even 30 minutes ago, just relived their worst experience in their entire life.
mm-hmm.
They've now come out and they're feeling like they just came out of a spa.
Mm.
I like to call it kind of a mental spa.
Yeah,
Yeah.
spa for your mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Now, on the matter of, say, traumas from the past, we could also look at, forward looking. into what is a predictive reality of the future, or a probabilistic reality of the future. A lot of us deal with existential angst about, oh, you know, your mortality, or if you're dealing with a chronic illness. Does hypnotherapy have the same efficacy for going forward as it does for backwards? So if I came to you and I presented with anxiety over a chronic illness, and it's not lethal, but I could be limited in my mobility, or my speech maybe decreased, and only maybe a 30% chance. So it's not even like a high potential that I may have a little bit of stutter, or that my limbs may not be. So is it effective going forward as it is going to the past, do you think?
I would say so, because that concern stems from something.
Yeah.
And we explore where that concern comes from. And we can reframe that. So anything in the future is something that you're concerned about, and why you're concerned about it. Maybe you've experienced something like that, or you know someone who's experienced that and you're fearful of it. That's, you know, where the anxiety is coming from. And you can absolutely overcome that, you know, fear of death, or fear of certain ailments. Now, for example, I also do past life regression. It's actually a lot more common nowadays that people want to experience that. It can be controversial, because whether you believe in reincarnation or not, I've had people who are essentially atheists, and I've had them go into past life regression, and they come out, they're like, what was that? What do you think it was? Again, be not leading, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, it feels like I lived that life before. And maybe it was another lifetime, maybe it was reincarnation, or maybe the mind is so powerful that it creates these stories to allow you to overcome these things. I believe in past lives, I believe in soul incarnation, but it's never something I project onto my clients. So it's always up to them to decide. But in terms of death, past life regressions are actually incredible, whether it's actually living that or at an expression of the mind, because we go through that past life, we bring them to the death scene, and when they separate from the physical body into the spiritual or soul self, they find a lot of ease. So people who are older, who are getting that sense of mortality, that it's more real because I'm getting old. Older people die. And that's a normal concern. Well, these people who have past life regressions and go through this death experience and end up as the soul or energy afterwards, they actually will come out of sessions not afraid of death anymore.
Right.
And that was something I had to learn in school. I was like, okay, do I skip the traumatic death experience and just put them into this soul experience? And the teacher's like, no, because you want them to experience that and live through it, because it will give them a new appreciation for the death and life afterward. And so people will come out of a session not afraid of death anymore. Not that they're going to go and do stupid stuff, but
skydiving without parachutes or whatever.
But they have a new lease on life. They're not worried about it. They can be open to new experiences.
That harkens to the psychedelic renaissance that's going on right now, and I know people will do sort of medium dose DMT who are dealing with cancer, terminal end stage type stuff, and they get through that experience with the DMT, and they're like, I'm good. I do not hold on to this fear of death now. And so that's another avenue, I think, which is great, to let go of that, because God, that can ruin your life to be worried about dying, you know? I always joke that if there were like 100,000 people on this planet that didn't die, I'd be pissed. I'd be like, you know, and it's not that I totally am in love with life. I mean, life is good and it's challenging. But if there were that group of people that never die and they're living, and, you know, and you're the one that has to die, then I'd be like, okay, this doesn't seem right. We all die.
Yeah.
That's the beautiful thing about life is working. Like Jim Morrison said, nobody gets out of here alive or
Yeah,
whatever.
right.
So it's like, yay. But I mean, embrace it, right? Embrace
Yes.
it. We all have that commonality. I mean, and what is the phrase? It makes equals of us all. So
Yeah.
yeah. So you don't, like you said, you don't push that and start Grand Prix racing at 75 or whatever.
Right.
Ooh, stream anything, But I think that's a good thing to confront. So anyway, let's see. I'll spring this on you, and if you're not comfortable with it, that's totally cool. But is there some exercise that we could do in like a 5-minute span that you'd be comfortable sharing with the YouTube
Yeah.
audience? That's just
Yeah.
sort of a light version of what you do, and that's something that could whet the appetites of some and perhaps be therapeutic for others. And I didn't talk about this with you before, and it just popped into my head about halfway
Sure.
through. So if you're good with that, maybe that could be a way to start to wind out our dialogue, is to share that with the audience if you're comfortable with it. Because again, I
Yeah.
didn't ask you ahead of time.
So I can give an exercise
Okay.
that people can take away. Are you wanting maybe like a small little hypnosis thing after? Is that what you're asking? Or
Well, what are you intuiting? Like something that you don't mind sharing with the YouTube audience
okay, I'll give two exercises.
Okay.
Uh, just because when I get into doing my scripts,
Okay.
I can get going.
Okay.
But so my first exercise is an NLP technique.
Okay.
And it's a way to find joy and happiness more spontaneously and regularly.
Okay.
Typically, as humans, it's so easy for us to find negatives in life. Oh, this guy cut me off today when I was driving, or the dishes are dirty, and one of the reasons we do that is a survival mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
When we can see the negatives, we can avoid dying. When we see, okay, the bushes are moving that way, there's probably a lion in there. Now, society's advanced technologically to the point that these negative rehashings are not necessarily healthy.
Mm.
Now, I wouldn't say override, but to find a different way around that is take 3 memories from, childhood to present, whichever, anything that made you smile or feel joy or love. Take those 3 things, and I want you to experience them as fully as you can in your head and cycle those in your head 3 times. Do it twice a day, ideally.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you do it once a day, that's fine. And repeat that. Do that for 7 to 14 days.
Mm.
And you will find that you'll actually start smiling randomly.
Mm.
You'll feel bouts of joy randomly. You're creating a habit of thinking of joy and positivity instead of this habit of always worrying about, what's on the news or
Doom.
whatnot. Yeah, exactly. So
Which is
that
so
is
easy today.
it is so easy. Absolutely. There's no shortage of bad things going on. There's also no shortage of good things going on.
This is true. This is true.
So overcome the primal nature of thinking about the negatives and start implementing those positive experiences. That's my first exercise that I would say, do that. It will change your life.
Okay.
I know I smile now. Whenever I see strangers and I feel my face just straight, like, oh, I start smiling. Oh, this is cool. And it's really great. That's kind of how I want to be seen in life. I want people to feel happy when they see me. And the second exercise is what I call self-hypnosis.
Okay.
And you can do it in 2 minutes, you can do it in 5. What it's really about is self-awareness. I suppose it's a sort of meditation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the way I suggest it is sit down, put your hands palm up in your lap, and you can do this. I usually suggest doing it when you're feeling anger or frustration, but you can do it with happiness or joy as well. And then you can close your eyes and you imagine, let's just say you're experiencing anger, and imagine that sensation of anger. You can feel it in your body, feel where that is, and then imagine putting it into your hands. And what does it look like? Is it a flame? Is it a cylinder? Can you see through it? Is it opaque? What shapes does it have? What sensations? What color is it? And then zoom into it if you can. And what does it look like on the inside? What shape again? What does it feel like? Does it have a color, sensations? And just be in that. And if you could change it, what would it look like if you wanted to change it? Or just experience for what's there and just sit in that, experiencing it. And that's it.
Mm.
And sometimes people don't see anything. That's okay. It's about becoming aware. The thing is, you took that moment to feel the jealousy, to feel the happiness, to feel the anger.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what that exercise is about. It's not about creating something in your hands or visualizing something in your hands. It's about taking that moment to actually feel what you're feeling.
Mm.
Don't just feel frustrated. Feel where that's affecting your body, what kind of pressures that's creating. Actually feel it. We're really good at just experiencing stuff and moving through our day. We're very busy. We got to do this, we got to do that. Instead, sit in it for a moment, understand how it's affecting your body. And the more you do that, the more you will be able to regulate your emotions.
Mm.
It's not bad to feel angry. It's not bad to feel what people consider negative emotions. It's part of
Mm-hmm.
the human experience. It's what you do with that emotion that matters. So if you feel anger, instead of bursting out and yelling at somebody, feel what it's doing to your body, why it's doing it to your body, and regulate it. And then, flip that sensation, flip it upside down. If you feel it spinning a certain way in your body, imagine spinning it the other way. And you'd be surprised at how you can actually begin to regulate emotions that sometimes let you lose control.
Mm. Thank you for that, Justinn. I appreciate that.
Of course.
I participated in it, so I personally
Great.
thank you, and on behalf of the audience, I thank you.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. It was a gift. So I do want to say something to the YouTube audience that you have a podcast of your own, and I listened to a couple of episodes, and I love the one you did with the imposter syndrome with Self-Help Sam.
Yeah.
So I'll whet the appetite of the audience, and I will have links available down, excuse me, in the description field to discover that. But your conversation with Self-Help Sam, which is kind of funny, was a good one, and some of the points you made were insightful. I thought that was really interesting. So I invite the audience to check that out and discover and see what's going on. So I think the last thing I want to check in with you on is both in the imagination and in sort of your practical pursuits. What do you see for your future? Do you want to expand your tools in your tool chest, or are you going to what are you looking to for your future, for your development of what you're doing, or
Sure.
maintenance or continuation?
I want to continue to do hypnotherapy. It's something that I believe I'll always do. It's a very strong passion of mine. I also am working on showing up at a lot more keynote speaking events because I believe I can make a big impact. So instead of just doing one-on-one sessions, I mean, I do group hypnosis as well, which is really cool. But I love keynote speaking because I can give, for example, the tools I just gave to you now, giving that to 100 people, 200, 1,000 people, and potentially shifting 1,000 people's minds and allowing them to think differently will also change society. And hopefully they can share it with other people. So I want to continue doing hypnotherapy, but I also am expanding my keynote speaking platform to be able to share with the world the, also demystifying hypnotherapy or hypnosis in general is a big deal. because of how effective it is. But bringing NLP techniques to the world and methods to improve ourselves, things that I believe that should be taught and that we should have as tools throughout our entire lives. I mean, now is better than never.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can share that, I love doing keynote speaking.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. No, that's clever, and it's it's casting a wider net and getting that positive change and transformation into their radar systems, and they can work with what you provide. Yeah, that's good to know, and that's good to hear. That's what I was interested in connecting with you, is that you do heart-based work. You're what your motives are that I can detect are that which we need as a society, and so I appreciate that, and I want to acknowledge that. Was there any last thoughts you want to share before we wrap things up? Was there anything else you want to get out to the audience?
I like to tell the audiences, especially when I'm a guest on shows, act as if you are the controlling element of your life.
Mm.
We are quite often affected by external situations, but like with that self-hypnosis I just gave you, you get to choose how you react to things.
Mm.
So in life, act as if you are the controlling element, and your life will change there.
Beautiful. That's a great way to cap this off, Justinn. I appreciate that.
Of course.
It's funny saying our name out loud like
right.
Justinn squared here today.
That's right.
IdeaCast. That's really great. So Justinn, thank you. I appreciate your time and your sage, and energetically I'm there with you, supporting what you do, and Godspeed to you. I know that you're going to flourish as a keynote speaker and get that message out there. So I see that for you. So again, thank you so much. I'll say goodbye to you after we're done, after I hit the record. But to the YouTube audience, those of you who are still with us in this conversation, I appreciate your attendance, your presence. I hope this conversation was good for you. Again, any information that can get you into Justinn's website and his podcasts, I will make sure that that's all down below in the description field. But again, YouTube audience, thank you guys very much. I appreciate your company and your companionship in this dialogue. Even though you're passive, hopefully this gets out and makes impacts on people's lives. So thank you. And again, Justinn, thank you. I appreciate
Thank you very much. Thanks for having
your
me.
audience. Yes, it was a great conversation. So, and like I said, after I stop recording, we'll say goodbye. Okay, bye YouTube audience. Thank you.